This isn't just a story about one man's crimes. It's about the architecture of impunity, the systems, the wealth, and the influence that were engineered to protect him. Those are the words of a judge describing the sheer volume of evidence against Jeffrey Epstein. This is a story about how a system, one designed to deliver justice, can be bent and ultimately broken to protect the powerful. To really understand what happened, you first have to understand the man at the center of it all, Jeffrey Epstein, a financier whose incredible wealth was, always cloaked in a deep, deep mystery. See, Epstein's real power wasn't just his money. It was his infrastructure, a carefully engineered machine, complete with private jets, secluded mansions and islands, and an entire staff trained to facilitate and to enforce silence. It was all designed for one purpose: to provide access to victims and to guarantee total secrecy. The first real official cracks in this architecture of impunity didn't appear in New York or in Washington. They appeared in March of 2005 in a place called Palm Beach, Florida. The investigation quickly snowballed, revealing dozens of victims, some as young as 14 years old. The local police were actually ready to charge Epstein with multiple felonies, but then a state grand jury came back with just a single minor charge. The move was so bizarre, so alarming, that the local police themselves escalated the case to the FBI. They believed justice was being deliberately blocked.
Now, the federal investigation should have brought real accountability. Instead, it led to one of the most controversial and frankly damaging legal agreements in recent American history.
The federal government had an ironclad case. A 60-count indictment was drafted and ready to go. But instead of moving forward, the U.S. Attorney's Office, led by Alexander Acosta, entered into secret negotiations. The result? A non-prosecution agreement. This NPA didn't just give Epstein immunity from all federal charges. It extended that immunity to his entire network of potential co-conspirators. And the most critical part, the victims were never told. It was all done in secret.
The contrast here is just staggering. On the left, you have what should have happened: a 60-count federal indictment, decades in prison, and a full investigation into his network. And on the right, you have what actually happened: a plea to a couple of minor state charges and only 13 months in a county jail, most of which he spent on work release. The federal case against Epstein and his entire network was shut down. That secret deal didn't just get him a lenient sentence. It bought him something far more valuable: a decade of silence. It allowed him to just return to his life among the global elite. So for 10 years, the case just faded away. Epstein served his minimal time with those generous work release privileges, and then he simply went back to his lavish lifestyle. Yes, he was a registered sex offender, but his powerful connections, they remained completely intact. That decade of silence was shattered in 2018, not by law enforcement, not by the justice system, but by the work of a single investigative journalist. The Miami Herald series Perversion of Justice exposed that secret deal to the world. For the first time, people read the stories of the silenced victims, and Alexander Acosta's role in the whole thing was suddenly put under a national microscope. That reporting set off a firestorm. New federal charges were filed in New York. Alexander Acosta, who by this point was the U.S. Secretary of Labor, was forced to resign in disgrace. And then, just over a month after his arrest, Epstein was found dead in his cell.
But Epstein's death, that didn't end the story. In a way, it was just the beginning of exposing the true scale of the network that protected him.
More than 6 million pages of documents have now been made public, and these Epstein files, as they're called, they paint a devastating picture of a man who operated at the absolute center of global power. The sheer breadth of his connections is unbelievable. The files prove that even after his 2008 conviction, Epstein's access to some of the world's most powerful people in politics, finance, science, and media, it all remained fully active. Even the Department of Justice's own internal review was critical of that original deal. Their report concluded that Alexander Acosta showed poor judgment. But that same report found no evidence of professional misconduct that violated the rules as they were understood at the time. A subtle but very crucial distinction. And while Epstein's main accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, was eventually convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison, the central question of this entire saga still remains completely unanswered. The files mention thousands of names, but to this day, no one else has been charged with a crime connected to Epstein's trafficking ring. The architecture of impunity, it seems, remains standing. This case is a stark warning. In our world, we focus on digital exploits, but Epstein's network was an analog one, a social network weaponized with the same precision as a piece of malware, but with far more devastating human consequences. So you have to ask yourself, if a system can be bypassed this easily, right out in the open, what does that really mean for the security of our most important institutions? Think about that. We want to know your perspective in the comments. It's through these discussions that we can bring these difficult stories to light. If you believe this kind of investigative work is important, you can support our channel by liking this video and subscribing. Thank you for watching.